On this week's episode, I have a fascinating conversation with Francisco Valente Gonçalves. Francisco is an award-winning psychologist who's lived in the UK for 4 years, traveled to more than 25 countries, and in his words, made the best decision of his life by coming back to Portugal. Francisco is also the founder of Rumo, an amazing online platform that helps people from all over the world with their mental health. We discuss, amongst other things, the amazing work him and his colleagues are doing at Rumo, how Portugal helps Francisco feel happy, free, and helps him with his mental health. We discuss some of the culture shocks that people could experience coming to Portugal, how they can navigate and engage, and Francisco gives some tips for finding your way in Portugal. For those of you listening, head over to our YouTube channel to watch some of this episode, and for those of you watching, click down below and subscribe, and for the full podcast episode, go to Stitcher, Spotify, Google, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And now, over to my conversation with Francisco. Welcome back, or welcome to another episode of Portugal, The Simple Life. And I'm really delighted to be joined here by Francisco Valente Gonçalves. Francisco, how are you?
I'm all right. I'm very good. Thank you very much.
Thanks for being on the podcast.
It's my pleasure. I saw some of your episodes and it's very, very honestly grateful to be here.
Francisco, why don't you start off telling us a little bit about you?
Of course. I'm basically a Portuguese guy living in Portugal. I was living abroad for a couple of years in the UK. During that time, I was doing a PhD in psychology and criminology. So my background is also in clinical psychology and criminal psychology, which is what I do for work. And yeah, during those years in the UK, I had the chance to visit many cultures. So I can say that Portuguese guy living in Portugal, but that enjoys a lot to know new cultures and new people. I think that's one good way to describe me.
It's a good place to start. This is something you just mentioned it about, having that sort of openness, that curiosity of other cultures, that willingness to welcome and to know people from different backgrounds. This is something I found, thankfully, is quite Portuguese and sometimes quite uniquely Portuguese, that we have an openness. And on the podcast, we've discussed it a lot. A lot of people say it's because of our history. A lot of people say it's because we're a mixture of things. But this is something that is, in general, quite a nice part of our culture.
Yeah. Dylan, I think that's mostly due to the fact that Portugal is such a small country, and we, at a certain time, needed to go out of the country to explore other places. Sometimes with a good vibe and good intentions, sometimes with questionable intentions, I would say.
Yes.
It's just a personal opinion. But despite of that, I think the Portuguese culture is a culture that enjoys to know other cultures, or at least I like to think that way, because I see that we have skills that are good enough to not only explore, but also to engage with other cultures.
We've had a couple of guests on the podcast who say the biggest challenge that they have sometimes with working and doing business in Portugal is they know what they're doing next month, whereas a lot of the time in our culture, that's not really the case. We kind of go day by day, which is interesting.
Yeah, it's a play by ear attitude.
Yeah.
Excuse me, and you need to accept that in order to enjoy life. You really need to accept that the system, and not speaking about the political or the social financial system, but the cultural system works that way.
Yeah.
It's very Mediterranean, and it's very played by ear attitude. So if you want to enjoy life, if you want to enjoy the fact that you get out of work or you finish work and you go to coffee, or you go to a place where you have a beer or where you have a juice or whatever, and gather some friends and be there having a chat, you will need to engage with that, because in a cultural system like Portuguese, like the Portuguese one, if you want to micromanage everything, you won't have time.
Portugal has had a very volatile history, a lot of ups and a lot of maybe more downs. And we've seen it in a more recent history with the 2000 financial crisis, followed then by quite a nice a peak, followed then by COVID, followed now by what we're going through now with maybe a bit of a housing crisis with like you mentioned, inflation. I mean, there's something very refreshing about the Portuguese attitude towards things that are out of their control. And maybe you can paint a bit of a picture for us there.
Yeah, I believe one factor that helps Portuguese folks to cope with that is the attitude of expecting something to be better tomorrow. There was this king, this Portuguese king. So the story is something like he disappeared in this fog day or fog night during the war. This guy called Don Sebastião, and the story remains that is remaining is that one day he's going to come back. He's going to come back and he's going to save us from whatever bad is happening. So is this attitude that tomorrow is going to be better?
Francisco, just about some of the work that you do. I mean, you work with people from all over the world. You've been in the UK. Tell us a little bit about Rumo and the work that you guys are doing.
Yeah, we started in 2017 whilst I was doing my PhD, and at the time I needed to do some therapy for personal reasons. I did before for professional reasons because I was working also with some subjects that were difficult to handle, and I was very new at the time. But in this case, I needed to do it for personal reasons. I didn't have the chance to do it in Portuguese in the city where I was living in the UK, in Leicester. So I thought that could be interesting to have the possibility to link someone from a specific culture with someone with a therapist that would relate themselves with the same culture. So in 2017, we founded the platform. It's an online platform that provides this service of mental health. Yesterday, I was having this conversation about unicorns, and Rumo never was supposed to be a unicorn because we didn't invent anything new, and we knew that from beginning. We didn't have a patent. We only had the observation that there was a niche, and we went to that niche straight away and very focused. But even though without the aim of one day becoming a unicorn, I was having this discussion about is it better to be a unicorn or is it better to be a camel? And because the camel image is, whereas the unicorn is something that it's very unexpected, and when it happens, it's like, oh wow, great. And then how do you maintain a unicorn? Because it needs to be fed regularly, and when I say regularly and fed is like money wise, human resources wise, systems, procedures, processes, whatever. Whereas the camel, it takes a long journey and it needs every now and then some water. And the distance that the camel takes might be longer, not saying that richer, but longer than a unicorn.
Francisco, just let's just talk about you and Portugal and your country. You mentioned having gone to all those places. You spent 4 years in the UK. It's always nice to travel and to see other places because it gives a different perspective to where you're from, where you live. What were some of the things that you missed about Portugal when you lived in the UK, and what were some of the things that you appreciated about Portugal once you had the opportunity to travel so much?
Hmm. So I would say that the possibility to be near the sea was one of the things that I missed. Possibly the food. I'm always a good person to take to a restaurant or to take to a new food experience. And I really like to cook, so it's my relaxation exercise. So yeah, the food, the possibility to be near the beach, and obviously some friends and family, but those are already acquired.
Francisco, for you, I mean, the old adage of you can never pour from an empty cup. Um, the work that you do is sometimes quite burdening. It's a bit of a weight on you. The things that you hear and talk about. How is this place that you live good for your mental health? How do you recharge? How do you find your way? How important is Portugal for you from that perspective?
I had in my life one of the best decisions that I when I analyze the decisions that I did throughout my life until now, living in the place where I'm living now, it was probably one of the best decisions that I did. So when I returned from the UK, I had this possibility to go either to Switzerland, the Netherlands, or Australia. And at some point, I had the opportunity to work here in Portugal. I wasn't in doing full time with Rumo at the time, and I had the opportunity to work based in Portugal. Housing in Lisbon was crazy; the prices were crazy, but most than that, there was one day that I was surfing, and the day was a great day. So friends, sun, beers in the beach. We were going for dinner, and at some point I was surfing. I was like, man, I wish I would have more days like this. And then suddenly, like an eureka moment, I was like, yeah, but probably you can. You are just looking in the wrong place.
Francisco, a question that we ask all of our guests: Portugal, the simple life. Why?
Mostly because of the capacity to transform emotions. The beautiful possibility to transform sadness into joy. The possibility to enjoy sadness the same way we enjoy the happiness moment.
Brilliant. Yeah, I like that answer. Thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation, Francisco. Thank you for being on the podcast.
It's a wrap.
It's a wrap. So thank you once again to our guests, and thank you to all of you for listening. Please subscribe, share with your friends, give us a thumbs up, and please leave a comment or a review. We always love to hear from you. Don't forget, Portugal the Simple Life also has a magazine, so download it. It's for free. We'll be back next week with a brand new episode, and as we say in Portugal, sejas bem-vindo. Welcome to the Simple Life.